Hey, welcome to yet another thrilling ride in the world that is MonoGame, and this time we're going to go through how to get started with MonoGame when you're using Visual Studio 2015. This is sort of a pair of videos. There's one for 2015 and there's another one coming up for 2017, which if you're using 2017 then feel free to click the link on the screen. So, obviously as of March 2017 now, we've got two big announcements. So MonoGame 3.6 has been released, finally, after a beta anticipation and a lot of, I don't know, the angry mob chasing the team around. The team eventually have put it together, they've tested everything now, and they feel it's safe to actually release a 3.6 release. Work's still continuing, so I expect there will still be a point release out in the next few months. But we shall wait and see. I mean, alongside this, it's quite timely, really, is that as of the time of recording this, yesterday, Visual Studio itself 2017 was released. To much great applause. So, new things going on, and in time for the 3.6 release, MonoGame has also been made ready for 2017 as well. A few little caveats, but if you, like I say, if you want to look at 2017, then check on the next video. This one's all about MonoGame 2015. So, getting started. Solidarity, brothers and sisters, because I forgot. So, over this now, we're going to go over about what the projects are, what we support, what you need to build each of these, and a few little tips and tricks going through all of them. In each of these cases, we'll just step through, go through what's possible, what you need to install, any additional components, any additional licenses, any additional accounts, and just basically general tips and tricks. So if we get into this, if you install Visual Studio 2015, and this is any of the editions including the community, off the bat you're going to be able to do Windows Desktop or Windows DX. You're also going to be able to use the cross-platform OpenGL project, which replaces the original sort of Linux and Windows GL and all those. There's now one cross-platform project for all of those platforms. You'll also be able to build content pipeline extensions. That's just a standard .NET platform project. Not listed on here, but it's just so useful is that you can also use the Xamarin shared template, even in this running mode, along with obviously portable class live and things, so you can have share code. As I always say, in case of what these give you is just the ability to just get a game, start developing from the bat. You don't need anything else, just start building it. You don't need to do anything. What I do say though is that once you, like, serious, you've got your project and you've gone through all your proof of concepts, then look at how you're going to build the game up properly. So if you're going to do a fully multi-platform project, then set it from the get-go. That way it's not going to cause you any confusion or problems later on. Follow the link is shown on the screen if you want to look at the video I did on this, just for showing you how to get it all set up. So, yeah, you've either got your project or you're not bothered about Windows or Linux or things like that, and you just want to build an Android game. Doesn't really matter. To each their own. So in Android, when you're setting up for Visual Studio 2015, you need to make sure that you've got the Xamarin C#.NET module installed, which is under the cross-platform mobile development arm. On top of that, you're also going to need the minimum of an Android SDK and an NDK. The two things whenever it comes to Android. The build of the SDK also has to match the platforms that you're going to target, and one thing you also get out of the box here is also the Microsoft Visual Studio Emulator for Android, which, if you're testing with Android, I highly recommend. It's fast, it works, it's a lot better than the Google version. You also, not necessarily, but I'd recommend also get a Xamarin account. The Xamarin stuff is now free for Android in Visual Studio 2015. It's just there. It just gives you additional news and things like that. So, what to look out for? So we've got our machine set up for Android. Also, the big thing with Android is a huge and fragmented platform. In all likelihood, you're not going to build one Android game. You're going to build many. Or you're going to build one and you're going to have thousands of hashes for all the different builds that you're going to have to make when you're actually deploying it. And it's just the nature of the platform, unfortunately. If you just do to the latest platforms, then you're cutting out a huge swath of the market. If you cut out certain devices, so do your research, work out what your minimal viable platform is, and then target for however many builds you're going to do, and then work out how many projects you're going to need for that. If you're using shared code in a proper multi-platform project, it's not really going to be an issue. The actual deployable project will be very small. You just need to make sure you're accounting for different capabilities, different types, different memory requirements, and things like that. So I highly recommend using the Android emulator that comes installed. The Google Android emulator, if you've never used it before, it's a pain. A real pain. I do mean this like a physical pain. As you're starting it up, you'll be staring at the screen wondering why this thing's not actually starting up. But in fact it is. It just takes a very long time. The only thing is the fact that the Microsoft emulator, it requires a machine with at least 8 gig. If you've got less than that, or if like my machines have only got 4 gig, then it's not going to start. If you try starting it, it'll come up with some helpful tips about saying reserve 2 gig of memory space to make sure you can run it. Invariably though, if your machine can't free that memory up, it's just not going to work. The backup for that is simply to have an Android device of some description to hand to deploy to. But be aware, deployment for Android does take a while. It's several minutes, and it's just something to take account of. You'll end up drinking more coffee than you expect because you'll be making coffee while you're waiting for it to deploy. So the big thing with Android is to basically test on physical devices. I mean, you can't stress this enough really, because of just the different ways it can work, and you only have to look at the Android store, at all the review comments about it doesn't work on such and such device, or it has a different behavior on such a device, and you can never explain why. It's just the nature of it. There is an interesting offering from Xamarin. They've got the Xamarin Cloud. That's a chargeable service, but there's also, as of yesterday, there is now the Azure mobile test, which from the looks of it is basically the Xamarin Cloud Mark II. So I'd say it's worth checking out. It's in preview, so while it's in preview, it's free. So grab it while you can and just get on and get using it. As I say, get a Xamarin account. It's free and you'll just get updates and things. There's nothing to pay for Android, thankfully. It's just there. There are some additional Xamarin services they offer as a sort of an enterprise or an extended version which you can pay for if you want to, but it's not absolutely required. Now for iOS and Mac, now the world is slightly different from here, and there's a few little things which are always gotchas for new developers who are picking up MonoGame working on these platforms. Now if you're setting up iOS, you only need one thing, and that's just the C#.NET Xamarin thing module. And the simple reality is the fact that on Windows, if you're building on Windows, there is no simulator. There's no emulator yet that I'm aware of. Due to the locked-in nature of the way that you have to develop for Apple platforms, you have to have a Mac. No matter what you do, if you plan to build, yes, you can design and build and test it on Windows. So as far as the code's perspective, to run it, you need a Mac. Even for iOS, you just need a Mac to actually build the code, so you can then use iTunes to then deploy it to your phone or your tablet or wherever else. Again, it's optional to get a Xamarin account, but they highly recommend it in this case, and there are some additional paid services which are quite useful to take account of when it comes to iOS. Generally speaking, building on iOS is going to cost you a little bit more, but it will save you a lot of money later on when you're doing it. Now, when it comes to Apple, if you want to do Mac, I'm afraid on Windows you're out of luck. You can only develop and build for a Mac on a Mac. That's it, end of. There is no way around it. So whether you're a nice little Mac clone or an iMac or something, or a Power Mac, that's all you can do with a Mac. There's no way around. iOS will at least have a bit of lenience. We can develop on Windows, we can build and test, but still you're going to need a Mac. Just something you can use. Now what I do is I've got a nice little Mac Mini, which I'll talk about in the next deck. You don't have to spend much money. It doesn't have to be a huge power machine. Since it's just doing builds, it's just going to sit there and you're going to build to it. Like Android, testing on a physical device is still highly recommended, and also testing on which versions of iOS are running on which devices, because obviously each OS always brings its additional features and can affect the performance of your game running on the device depending on what version of iOS they're running. So watch out. Again, the Xamarin Cloud and also this new Azure mobile test platform have all the tests built in there. You build it, you deploy it to it, and then it physically tests it on a load of devices for you, and gives you run-by-run stats. If you've not looked at it before, go and look at it. And I said you need, Xamarin Account's not mandatory, but I get it. It's just doesn't cost you anything. So when you want to build for your iOS, like I said, you need a Mac, but you can do it on the cheap. I spent £50 on a little Mac Mini. It's a trusted little thing. It only gets whipped out every once in a blue moon, and when it's not, it's propping the door open. That's just me. But anyway, when you're buying one, be careful. You do not want to be buying something that's too old, can't run the latest software, you've not got the discs for it. It's an interesting world if you've not ventured into it before. For people if you have friends who are used to Macs, lean on them heavily if they will let you, or at least buy them a few beers or a few apple shandies. When you're running it, it has to be running the latest iOS SDK, which you can get from the Apple developer site, latest version of Xcode again, and it must be a minimum of macOS Yosemite or 10.10 or above. Most Mac Minis and things like that come across at least 10, and it's just making sure that it has the capabilities to at least be upgraded to that. Some can't, so be aware. And obviously, you're going to need an Apple Dev Center account. Obviously, you're going to publish, you're going to need a store account. It's simple as. The Xamarin software is free, even on a Mac. You can check out the link below, which tells you about setting it. It goes through all the steps for setting up your Xamarin, your Mac build host, and it's very good. The basic edition of that is free, but if you want to do more, you'll need either a Xamarin license or an MSDN subscription. Either will do, because obviously Microsoft owns Xamarin now, so all the licensing is quite centralized. So that's Apple. Now, what about Windows? Now, I've split this up into two sections just because they're slightly different. So when we're talking about Windows 8 or Windows 8.1 realistically, again, Visual Studio 2015 comes with the tools for this out of the box, but you will note this is for 8.1, not 8.0. 8.0 is gone. You might have 8.0 projects, but if you open them in Visual Studio, it will basically try to force you to upgrade it to 8.1. The store doesn't even allow you to submit 8.0 packages now. All you need are basically the UWP development tools, and you also need the tools and Windows SDKs. You need all of these. And in Visual Studio 2015, it will just install all of them. Simple as. If you want, you can also install the phone emulators, which are great, but if you're not got a machine that can run emulators, then there is no point to save yourself from that disk space, because it does take some space in there. As I say, Windows 8.0 isn't supported. MonoGame has also dropped support for Windows 8.0 from its packaging DLL, so if you still need those, you'll have to stay on 3.5 or below. But you can't even submit those packages anymore. I'm losing my tongue. Things were okay. So Windows 8.1, Windows 10 has now been out for 2 years now, so it's on its way out. But there's still a high degree of percent of machines out there. But almost anyone realistically is upgrading to Windows 10 when they can. But saying that, Windows 8.1 builds are still supported by the store. They will be magically uplifted for Windows 10, so they'll still work. So there's still lifespan in there. Don't worry about it too much. And again, physically testing is recommended, but it's not really as stringent, really, with these. You only need to worry about it when you get to the mobile space because of all the different varying Windows mobile devices that are out there. But beware, if you use the emulators, then they're always going to have a higher performance than most machines out there. So if you can, again, physically test. So when we move up to Windows 10, things change slightly. Obviously, we're doing the new Universal Windows Platform projects. We're building not just for one device anymore, like with the rest, where you're having separate projects. You're building for almost the entire Windows 10 family. That's whether it's desktop, mobile, tablets, slates, IoT devices, HoloLens, you name it. You can build for it if you design it for it. I will stress that you have to design it for it. So when we're looking at this in 2015, again, it's just the Universal Windows App development tools you need to install. Again, if you expand that, you do need all the SDK versions that supports. This is mainly because MonoGame has a sort of a minimal viable version it says to recommend, and you can always change it. But out of the box, it comes with that way. When the creators update releases, that's 14.393, if you don't quote me on that, that will change things around a little bit. But again, do your research, see what the studies say, what kind of machines are out there. From what I can see, there is a huge update for going to the creators update, simply because it had tons of new features. And also, people can control when they get update notifications, which apparently some people like to be able to change. One thing to be aware of is that the first time you start Visual Studio and you select a new Universal Windows project, it's going to prompt you to check whether your machine is in development mode or can support sideloading of apps. Now, my recommendation is to use the development mode. It's a very simple setting. It just means that you can build and deploy, and it's one-click deploy. It's fine. If you're sideloading, you have to build it, then you have to manually sideload, and that's fine for test machines or machines you want to remote deploy to and things like that. But if you're doing development, just set it to development mode. It's going to install some additional components behind the scenes to make your machine development capable. But it's easy enough and it's job done. You do need a Windows Store license, but obviously that's been greatly reduced of late. And it's a one-time fee only now. It's not yearly. It's just you pay once, you got access to the store, ship for life. Nice and easy. Microsoft do things right sometimes. So with Windows 10, with MonoGame, it just works. It's out of the box. You build it, deploy it, ship it. It's done. You know, you'll need to do some reading about when you're working between the different API versions. But the beauty in there is the fact that you can say only run this bit of code if the API on the device it's running at is at least this. And then if it is that version, it'll run it. If not, it will ignore it. No exceptions, no crashes your game because an API or something's missing. It's just done right. But read up on it, make sure you understand how that works when you come to a point when you need it. So I think I covered that in my Xbox session where we're using some advanced features in sort of the Creators Edition. That's what the Xbox runs. And there's just some APIs you need to be aware of when you're using it, which only work on a certain or higher version of the API, or if it's running on Xbox, for instance. UWP is a one-size-fits-all, so plan for how you're going to work, how it's going to work for different resolutions, different input patterns, whether it's keyboard, mouse. With Android and iOS, generally, you've only got really one way of doing things. So Mac, it's only keyboard and mouse. With an iOS device, it's only touch. With Android, it can be a mix, but generally speaking, most Android devices just cope with those things. With Windows, it's best to make sure you're delivering the best experience for the types of devices you're supporting. And, if that's only Xbox or if it's only a desktop, then start there and work your way up. There's nothing that says you need to do everything at once. What was nice as well is that MonoGame also did a nice little news post. Thanks to Tom for that. If you look on the monogame.rocks website, I love that web address. Tom has done a nice little blog post about the fact that, MonoGame fully supports this new Creators Dev program, which is the alternate way to be able to build apps for the Xbox and using the Windows Live services. But ultimately, then you can also take your UWP project and deploy it to Xbox that way as well. If you then want to take it up a notch and you want to build a proper native Xbox game, then MonoGame has got your back. It does support the Xbox One as a native platform, but you'll have to be part of the ID Xbox program, get their people to talk to the MonoGame people, and you'll get access to the MonoGame Xbox version, which is practically identical to everything else from an API perspective. There's just a few extra bits, a few fundamental framework bits that have changed, but ultimately you shouldn't have to change your game much apart from adhering to the 1001 certification requirements to get your game running. That includes full integration with Windows Live. So if you join the Creative Dev program and you're connected to Live already, you've started half the battle already. And when you get to the Xbox, it just becomes easier. And then you also get things like achievements and leaderboards and lots of other fun stuff to really value and reward your players as they're playing the game. So, sort of closing notes now as we kill this out, is that with any project itself, plan for what you're going to do, work out from day zero, are you going single platform, are you going multi-platform, and then build your project towards that way. If you're using multiple platforms, make sure you're using shared content projects where you can. This will just save you a ton of hassle when you're managing art and content. So only have platform-specific content projects where you need them. I'll stress that. It'll save you a ton of bother. And, you know, get out there, get your game noticed, get your game known to people. It doesn't mean pushing people in the face and start saying, it's coming out in 2 years, because then people will fall asleep. But get out there, make sure people know what your game is, what you're doing with it. You know, start a dev blog and do what you do. So keep the project going and test often. And if you can and have the energy, you know, not necessarily employ, but ask people to test your game. You know, have a website when people sign up and they say, here, have a dev out of a version of my game. Tell me what's going on. I do this for a lot of projects. So if I see a beta or an alpha or anything else, or someone just wants something to test, I'll put my hand up. That's just what I do. That's my MVP goal in life as well, to just make sure people, you know, get good games out there. And be fair, be warned, I am brutally honest in my review comments. You know, if I don't like something, I say I don't like it. And if I do, I say, well, but in all cases, it's constructive criticism. Ugh. Try saying that with a few drinks. And just to make sure that offering ideas that I've either offered to other people or people have suggested to me of what makes better UX or better gameplay or different things to try. And again, it's up to you what you do. It's not my game at the end of the day, it's always yours. One of these days, I will actually stop doing blog posts and tutorials and things and actually make my own games. Heaven forbid. So, this has been me. Again, solidarity, brothers and sisters. And this is me out for this. And if you want to see the 2017 version of this, then watch the next video. For now, Tulipipski.